This week on Dance Studio Advertising, we examine the 6 critical numbers that you need to know in your dance studio to make good decisions. Want more students in your dance studio? Then you're in the right place. This is Dance Studio Advertising, the only podcast committed to helping you attract, convert, and retain more students fast. So grab a notebook, get your pen, and let's get into it. Hey, Christian, do you know what I'm thinking about right now?
No, Bryce, what are you thinking about?
I have been thinking about the importance of really, truly understanding your numbers as a studio owner. We've touched on this before in past episodes, but it's more and more on the top of my mind. And I wanted to talk through really the important numbers that you need to be looking at in your business to know if you are winning or if you are on the struggle bus and just not know it yet. So that's what I want to dig into today. And I want to just get real and practical and tactical with, I think, a topic that's scary to a lot of dance studio owners.
What, they don't like math and numbers? So that's why they got into the business in the first place?
I've never met a studio owner that's like, you know what I love is spreadsheets. Never.
They're out there, but definitely not the majority.
This is certainly not. Well, so really, there's only a handful of numbers that you need to really look at to understand how your business is doing in terms of your overall growth. And I want to start with kind of more specifically with marketing. Specifically, what are those numbers that you need to be looking at? And then more generally in the business, so that if I handed you kind of a printout of how, with these 5, 6, 7 numbers, and you were stranded on a desert island, you would understand, is the business succeeding relative to, is it growing, is it shrinking, or is it stabilized? And so really, let's talk about the first one. And I'm going to let you address this most broadly, but it is the cost per lead. Mm-hmm. CPL, as it's often talked about in marketing circles. What is the CPL? Why is it important? What does a studio owner need to be looking at regarding their CPL to know if they're doing well?
Yeah, I mean, this is probably the most basic and important number to know how well your marketing is doing. It doesn't matter. You shouldn't be measuring likes. Don't be measuring followers. What are those even? What purpose do they serve in the first place? So marketing should really tie back to your enrollments and your growth of the business. And so cost per lead is essentially the number of, and this is, especially when it comes to paid advertising, how much am I spending in dollars to get a new parent to reach out about my dance programs? And so that's really what cost per lead is that number. And this number can vary, but it's a good number to measure. Like generally you want to have a lower cost per lead. That means you're getting more parents to sign up on your list for a smaller dollar amount. And this is a number that goes up and down depending on seasons, but this is a really good way to determine, am I using my advertising dollars effectively in whether it's Google, Facebook, Instagram, wherever you're paying for your programs to be placed, even print magazines or postcards, this all applies. You need to be able to measure how much you're spending to then with how many parents you add to your list. Pretty much as simple as that. Was that simple?
Well, yeah, no, I mean, I think it is. It's basically dollars per new email address, dollar per parent who's interested. So every time we've defined lead as a person who reaches out because they're curious about your service, they give out their name, email, phone number. Every single time you get one of those, whether it's through a postcard mailer or a local magazine or through Facebook and Instagram, wherever those are coming from, the amount of money that you are spending to get one new person is your cost per lead. It's your CPL. Lower is better. It's like golf. Lower is better. We want, because that means you can get more leads for less money ultimately. So CPL is a big one. The other one that I think is really important to keep an eye on is your lead to trial conversion ratio. And that's a mouthful. But really, if we boil it right down, it's if you get 10 leads, 10 people to reach out and say, I'm interested in your service, how many of them actually book a time to show up to try a class? Mm-hmm. And this is an important number because generally speaking, people aren't going to buy dance until they walk in. They want to know, is the drive as easy as I think it's going to be? Is my kid going to like the teacher? Are there any kids in the class that my daughter already knows? Like whatever, right? There's all these factors that go into that. And so we need people to walk through the door. Mm-hmm. And this ratio is important because it tells you it's a sign of either things are going well or of a bigger problem. And the bigger problem is you're not talking to your leads well. You're not following through with them well and effectively because they're saying that they're interested, but then they're not following through on it. So either you're not following up well, or frankly, you've got the wrong lead, which I guess is another potential outcome of that.
Yeah, that is a good one. It is. And I like to think about it, converting it to the first meaningful action, like the first visit. So trials is one way, tours is another way, but what is that next step from they reached out and said, hey, I'm interested, to then now I've got some skin in the game. It could be a paid trial. It could be a studio tour. It could be they show up for a free trial. So it may be a little bit different for you, but that conversion, that lead conversion step is an important number. What's next?
Yeah. So the next big one is once they're standing in front of you and you're giving them an experience, hopefully, and you need to be asking for a sale at some point, right? Great. How was the class? Did you enjoy it? Yes, we loved it. Do you want to sign up? Would you like to enroll? However you want to word that for you is totally up to you. But we need to know, of the people who are standing in front of us, what percentage are saying yes. So again, if I have, and I'm making up numbers, 100 leads, and 20 of them say, yeah, we want to come in for a trial, and 5 of them end up booking appointments of my 20, well, that tells me where I'm breaking down. It tells me that we're not selling as well as we could be. It tells me we're not following up as well as we could be, because 20 out of 100 is not great. And so this is where I really understanding your conversion ratio, your enrollment ratio, whatever language you want to use around that. But what percentage of people, if you have 10 people trying a class, how many are saying yes? And I'll be honest with you, I'm becoming more and more of a stickler on knowing this number, because when I talk to studio owners, they all say, when I say, if somebody's standing in front of you, 10 people stand in front of you, how many say yes? Everybody says to me, 9 out of 10 say yes. But then when we actually look at the numbers, it's like 4. And that's a really big difference in terms of understanding how well you're doing in the business, what a growth trajectory might look like with realistic data.
Yeah. And this is why numbers are important, because your feelings may not match with what's actually happening on paper and in the numbers. And I also just kind of want to double click on something here important, because, we hear that a lot, and I believe them, because maybe before any paid advertising, their leads were coming in from referrals, and the parent already has a kid they know in the dance studio. And so there is a higher level of trust in there. But you got to remember, when it comes to advertising, you're going to get a lot more of the impulse buyers, and the level of trust is low because they don't really know who you are yet, versus someone who was referred by a dancer who's been with you for 3 years. They're like, oh, wow, they've been here for 3 years. I know them. My kid's going to be in the friend's class. Like, there's a higher level of trust. And so it's easier to make that sale. But I think what I've noticed is implementing paid advertising strategies really kind of highlights the gaps in the enrollment process, where, we really got to have a dialed in process for, excellent communication, having a really excellent, first visit experience to create that first impression, asking for the sale in person. You need to put a little bit more effort to people whose trust barometer is a little bit lower compared to someone who was referred to by a friend that's already in the classroom.
That's a big one. Yep.
And so here you can potentially start seeing, you can use these numbers to understand, like, where do I need to optimize my business, right? If your leads are really expensive, it's going to be in the marketing. If your lead to conversion is low, look at your follow-up and communication. If your first visit to sale is low, what's that customer experience inside the studio? How is that being presented? Is it consistent, or are parents coming in for trials and the front desk isn't there to greet them because they've been told, hey, you got to get all these costumes ready? And so the parents walking in, they're like, clueless, how do I get, what classroom am I in? Like, who's my teacher? So all these things can really illuminate what part of the business you can actually make meaningful action to improve these numbers.
This is huge. So the other thing that I'm going to just toss in now as we're talking about marketing is understanding your numbers over time. Now, this is something that we're recently been thinking about. We haven't truthfully done anything with this ourselves yet, but understanding your numbers over time. How many leads are you getting in August, and then in September, and then in November, and then in April? Because not all months are the same. There are months where it's really, really busy and you're going to get a lot of traffic through your front door. There's going to be months where things cool off and they're not as, quote, effective as they were before. When you have no data, when you are not looking at these numbers year over year, then when October rolls around and things cool off because it's an election year and everybody's paying attention to Black Friday sales that are right around the corner, you might be like, oh my gosh, it's not working. But if you have the numbers and you can look at it and go, oh, right, I know that every October it cools off for me, but then it picks up again in the second week of December, you can start making smart business decisions. You can sleep better at night. I mean, really, truly thinking and looking longer term at these numbers is going to give you, use the word barometer before, it's a good one, like kind of the data that you need to steer your ship on the right course.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's important to have a baseline, and you really got to get a full year of data under your belt so you can start to compare year over year. Because like you said, certain points in the season, they're not all the same. And if this October was like, dang, I only got 15 leads, that's terrible. But then you look at last year and it was 10 leads. It's like, oh, well, it's not terrible. It's actually better than what I did improve over the year. And it's going to help. It's easier to compare year over year rather than this month from 2 months ago, because the seasonality of it is just, it's not apples to apples. Like you're looking at two very different times of year there and varying results.
And we see a lot of studio owners that struggle with this. They get caught up in the emotion of it, of the numbers or the revenue or whatever, and they completely miss it. I had a conversation with one of our clients last week, and just to illustrate, I was like, how's things going? How's your fall? She's like, terrible. My September enrollment is awful. I said, really? Like, sort of surprised. Like, okay, I thought things were going better than that. What's going on? She's like, yeah, my September enrollment was just trash compared to last year. I said, well, how many did you have last year? She's like, I don't know. I said, okay, well, why don't we go look? And she went back and looked. She opened this year with 179. She opened last year with 120. And so she's, you know, emotionally, it felt different to her than what reality actually was. Your emotion, your memory will lie to you. It absolutely will. We're not data machines. We forget. Write things down.
I don't even know what I had for breakfast this morning. I forgot. Yeah.
So moving away from those initial marketing numbers, there's a few others that I really do think studios need to be tracking consistently. And one is ad drops. So ad drops is actually two separate numbers, but this is important to know. Ads are the number of new enrollments that you're getting on a monthly basis. Drops are, as you can imagine, the number of cancellations that you receive on a monthly basis. And this is really, really important. We tell a story often about a studio owner that we knew, and we checked in with her and we said, how are things going? She was over the moon. She was delighted with how everything in her business was going. She was behind on rent. She was struggling to pay teachers. And she's like, we finally turned a corner. I enrolled 15 new dancers this week. And we went, oh my gosh, like, yes, you are off to the races. And then when we looked at her numbers, we realized she had also, during that same 1 week period, lost 17 dancers. So she was -2. But she wasn't paying attention to both sides of the coin.
Yeah.
So knowing what's coming in and knowing who's going out is really important to understanding your growth, again, over time.
Yeah. So we talked about false negatives. That's a false positive where you feel like you're growing, but then when you look at your revenue, it's like, why is my revenue not going up? And so unless you're paying attention to both ends of the spectrum, you got to see what is your net new total enrollment base. And just to something that we've been really trying to crack the code on this, which is tricky because all the class management softwares, they're, you know, let's be honest, some of them are very difficult to get this data out of. And so some of them don't really differentiate between people who dropped a class, but they actually added a new one. And so it looks like they dropped, but really they added another class. And so it's hard to tell, like, did they actually drop out completely, or did they just go from one class to the other class? So just something to keep in mind there, you know, just check out the nuances of your chosen class management software, because you want to make sure you're looking at the right number in there, because not all of them tell you the full story as you do. So there may need to be some number crunching there, but just check for those kind of situations where you want to really count true drops, people who have removed all classes, brand new students, and then of course people who are adding and taking on multiple classes there.
Well, and I'm glad that you brought up that those who end up taking multiple classes, because this one's an important number to measure as well. We're obviously marketers. We partner with Dance Studios to help them get more leads, turn those leads into trials, turn those trials into customers. That's what we do. That's how we do it. But there's this whole other side of the business that shouldn't be forgotten either, which is your internal sales machine. So when you get little Susie in and she's taking one class a week as a 4-year-old, and then she turns 5, you have an opportunity to move her into not 1, but 2 or even 3 classes. And so understanding the number of kids that are taking multiple classes, or more specifically, figuring it out as a ratio, which is your number of enrollments divided by the number of kids, is going to give you a number. 1 means every kid is taking exactly 1 class. Anything above that means that you've got kids taking multiple classes. The higher that number is, the more revenue per kid you are going to receive. And the reason that's important is because when you know how much a kid is worth, a dancer is worth to your business, now you can afford to spend more money to acquire more kids. Yep. And that's really important, because in marketing, and this is true, whoever can afford to spend the most money to acquire a customer wins every time. Every time.
True.
And so understanding, how are you doing? Are you incentivizing your front desk to do multiple class enrollments? Are you incentivizing teachers to suggest other classes to kids so that they're not taking just ballet 1, but also whatever, lyrical or whatever? Are you doing that? And if you're not measuring that number, if you don't know how many kids, what percentage of kids, what a kid is worth to you, it's not going to be super beneficial. So knowing that the number of kids, the percentage of dancers that are in more than 1 class, helps you to make really good marketing decisions as you look towards the future.
Absolutely. Don't overlook retention and upselling as another lever to overall increase the bottom line of your revenue.
Absolutely. And so the last one that I just want to mention is revenue itself. This is going to be really important. And revenue is cash in and cash out. It's not just one way. I think a lot of studio owners that we've talked to are afraid to look at their numbers. They're afraid because they're thinking, I'm not an accountant, but you don't really need to be. To be honest, when we were first getting started, before we hired a bookkeeper, we just went into Chase Bank every month and downloaded the statement, and we could see how much was there at the beginning, how much was added, how much we spent. It's not that hard, but it is important. It takes 5 minutes, but you do need to know what's coming in, what's going out at either the beginning or at the end of every month. And the reason that's important, again, is you cannot make good, sound business decisions if you don't know what your revenues are. We hear horror stories of studio owners who will end up eating $20,000 of potential profit because competition fees went up and they didn't include that in the emails or the contracts when they sent them out, or they didn't collect, or they had a bunch of people skip town on them or whatever. Can't have that happening. You've got to know cash in, cash out at the beginning and end of every month. Yep. That one's critical.
Yep.
So last, as we wrap this up, and again, I'm realizing, and we take turns with this, these are things that I'm passionate about in the business. You talk about things that you're passionate about. And that's what makes this such an interesting episode or a podcast, because you get multiple perspectives. But I just want to say to anybody who's listening today, who's feeling overwhelmed, who's thinking about hearing all these numbers and going, oh my God, I don't know how to do any of this. I'm just going to suggest to you, take baby steps with it. Start small, track one thing at a time until it becomes normal and habituated and easy. And then you can expand. And so we've talked about a handful of metrics today that really are critical to know. And if you know, I think there's 6 of them. If you know all 6 of them, then you can make really smart business decisions. If you don't, you can still make good ones, but they're not going to be nearly as informed as if you have all of them. But start small, start somewhere, cash in, cash out's a great place to start.
Yep.
You know, if you're advertising, looking at your CPL is a good one. And if you don't know how to do any of this, if you don't know what a CPL is, you don't know where to find that, feel free to reach out to our team here at Dance Motion Marketing. We're on a mission to help 500 dance studios double their revenue, enrollment, and profit. We never said you had to be a customer of ours to receive help. So don't hesitate to reach out. We'd be happy to help you think through some of this for yourself.
Well said. Get acquainted with those numbers, studio owners. Get friendly with them one step at a time. Even if it's just, first week of the month, you block out an hour where you just review how you did the previous month. So like Bryce said, we're always an advocate of getting 1% better. Don't try to bite off more than you can chew at once, because we're in this for the long haul, and you don't need to do it all today, but you can start small today.
Really well said. All right, well, that's it for this episode. We'll be back same time, same place next week. See you soon.